Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Good morning. Glad you're here. Are you ready for the Word?
Yes, sir.
Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 6 again. You there?
Yes, sir.
Verse 1. Now these are the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments, which Yahweh your Elohim commanded to teach you, that you might do them in the land where you go to possess it. Can't do them unless we learn them. So they need to be taught, so that we learn them, so that we can do them. That you might fear Yahweh your Elohim, to keep all His statutes and His commandments, which I command you, you and your son and your son's son, all the days of your life, pardon me, and that your days may be prolonged. Hear therefore, O Israel, and observe to do it, that it may be well with you, and that you may increase mightily, as Yahweh Elohim of your fathers has promised you, in the land that flows with milk and honey. And again it says, Hear, O Israel. Hebrew word Shema. Shema means listen intelligently. Listen so as to be able to do what you're about to be told. Shema, O Israel. Yahweh our Elohim is one Yahweh. You shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your might. And these words which I command you this day shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently unto your children. You shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them for a sign upon your hand. They shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them upon the post of your house and on your gates. We began this study of the 613 laws that are found in Torah last week, and we began that study with one purpose in mind, and that is to learn them, keep them, and do them. That's the whole purpose. We cannot guard them. That's what the word keep means. We can't guard them if we don't learn them. And if we don't learn them, we can't do them. So to learn, keep, and do, we have to study them. Well, last week we got started by making some very important points. Let me go back over those with you real quickly before we move on. Point number one is, there is nowhere in Torah that we're told that there are 613 laws. A highly respected Jewish scholar who lived in the late 1100s, died in the early 1200s. His name was Moses ben Maimon, was called Rambam. We talked about him last week. He's the one who went through Torah, cataloged all of the laws, put them in different categories, numbered them, and said there were 613 laws. And that's fine. If you want to go by that list, that's fine. But if you don't want to go by that list, that's also fine, because Torah does not list them for us or tell us there are 613. Because the point's not whether there are 613, 597, or 642. That's not the point. The point is, Torah is Yahweh's instruction to us on how to operate in His creation. And that's what we want to discover, is all of the instruction that He's given us for operating the way He wants us to. The second point we saw was found in Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 14, which says this, But the word is very nigh unto you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. We spent a lot of time looking up the word nigh, N-I-G-H, nigh. Nigh is the word that's used to speak of someone being our next of kin, nigh of kin, closely kin. So what we discovered last week is that we in Torah have the same father. We in Torah have the same dad. Our origin is the same. Yahweh breathed into man and he became a living soul. Yahweh also breathed out all Scripture. So we and Torah came from the same place. We both came from the breath of Yahweh. Therefore, we said it this way, the DNA of Torah is in us. We and Torah share the same DNA. Romans 2 verse 14 says that even the Gentiles have Torah written in their heart. Their conscience bears witness of the fact that Torah is in their DNA. Those are important points to remember. So Torah's not hard to keep. Torah's who we are. Romans 7:22 said it this way, I delight in the law of Yahweh after the inward man. So when Paul looked at the struggle that he sometimes had, he understood that down on the inside of him there wasn't really a struggle. The inward him found delight in all of the instruction written in Torah. Well, with those 2 points in mind, that is, 613 is not an exact number given to us in Torah. And the second point being the word is nigh, it's in our mouth, it's in our heart, it is our DNA. We started a study of the laws that were listed in Deuteronomy chapter 6. And we stopped at verse 6 and we said we'd come back today and look at verses 7, 8, and 9. So that's exactly what we're going to do. Let's reread verse 7 and we'll start there today. You shall teach them diligently unto your children, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. Is that a commandment? Yes. Certainly it is. You shall teach the instruction of Yahweh to your children. Actually, it says, you shall teach them diligently to your children. What a phrase. Teach them diligently. Those 3 English words come from just one Hebrew word, shanan. And that Hebrew word, shanan, means to pierce through like a sharp sword, or it refers to the sharp point of an arrow. You look it up in Strong's, it also says that this word means to whet, W-H-E-T. You know what a whetstone is? What is a whetstone? Something you sharpen things with. That's the purpose of it. You know, sometimes we'll refer to an appetite or a desire in this way. Boy, this is going to whet your appetite. What does that mean? It's going to make your appetite sharper or stronger. It's going to make you hungrier for a certain thing. Your desire just became really sharp for something. So when Yahweh says, teach them diligently to your children, it means more than just spend hours and hours and hours teaching your children what Torah says. Spend hours and hours making sure they memorize and read and study and take tests. That's not what this word means. Teach them diligently means to find creative ways to pierce their thinking with Torah. You can spend hours pounding it into them until they dread the thought of studying Torah. Or you can spend time praying, asking Yahweh to help you whet their appetites for Torah. Make them hunger for it by piquing their interest in it. When you're looking at the stars or the moon, remind them that our Elohim created it. Right. And remind them that it's recorded in Torah. Remind them they can go find where it's written and see for themselves how He created it all. When they find something that doesn't belong to them and they're struggling with what to do to it, you can let them know that Yahweh understood we might someday find things that don't belong to us. And He put in Torah what we're supposed to do with it. Let's go find out what Torah says. Whet their appetite for what's written in Torah. That's what this commandment means when it says, talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. Torah study isn't always done sitting around a desk and reading. It's done while we're living. That's the point of verse 7. While you're going about life, introduce your children to the instruction of Yahweh. Cause them to want to know where it is written that we can't eat bacon. Don't just tell them we don't or we can't or Yahweh said. Whet their appetite so they'll want to go find it and read it for themselves. Cause them to want to know where it is written that we're to Sukkot once a year. Have them read it for themselves. Cause them to want to know where it is written that we don't participate in the holidays that were created by men. Where is that written? Find it. Cause them to want to know where it is. Cause them to want to know where it is written that we're to keep the Sabbath. Whet their appetite. The narrative in Torah of how Torah came to be in itself is greater than any fiction book they could ever possibly read. And if you get them interested in reading Torah, the thing begins to come alive to them. It is alive, but it begins to come alive to them. The narrative in Torah of how Torah came to be is more exciting than any superhero movie that Hollywood ever made. Right. Do you know where it's written? How Torah came into existence? Can anybody tell me where that is? Whet your children's appetite to find that. Because what we're told is that a mountain, that there was a cloud that set down upon that mountain, that the mountain begins to burn from the very presence of Yahweh, that there was thunder and there was lightning, there was a thick cloud, then a trumpet began to blow, and the trumpet blew louder and louder. It waxed louder and louder, we're told. And the one blowing the trumpet was in heaven, and the sound was coming out of heaven. It wasn't a man blowing the trumpet. And the sound of it did not wane at all. And the children of Israel saw this, and they heard this loud sound. And it was so awesome and amazing and terrifying that they trembled. We're told that the whole mountain was smoking. We're told that Yahweh descended upon it in a fire. We're told that the smoke billowed. It wasn't just sitting there. It billowed up off that mountain as if the mountain was a furnace. That Yahweh is so mighty and so holy, we're told that the mountain quaked. And that word quaked means to tremble in fear. That mountain trembled at the very presence of Yahweh that had set down upon it. And as that trumpet waxed louder and louder, we're told Moses called out to Yahweh. And Yahweh answered him and said, "Come up hither." And Moses went up into the smoke and into the cloud and into the very presence of Yahweh. Folks, when you start reading things like that and get your children excited about things like that, it will change our life and their life. What an awesome story. Because we're not just reading about an incident that took place. Instead, we're reading a narrative that's letting us know that Torah came in a mighty, majestic, powerful way. And if man's going to change it, there better be a mighty, majestic presence of Yahweh that said to change it. Right. And if there's not, then it's not changed. Right. Amen. There are story after story after story. There is story after story after story found in Torah that our children need to know about. Teaching our children is not about making sure they know that there are over 600 laws they need to learn. Teaching our children Torah is about making sure they know how awesome and powerful and loving and merciful our Elohim is. He created all things. He created us from the dust of the earth. He saved Noah and his family. He saved Lot. He entered into a covenant with Abraham, and you and I have the opportunity to partake of the benefits of that covenant if we have the faith of Abraham. He spoke to Moses from a bush that burned but was not consumed. He sent plagues upon Egypt. He divided the Red Sea. I remember the first time I began to study those words when Joshua led the people across the River Jordan to go into Jericho. And it says that the river stood up in a heap. It didn't just split, but the river's flowing down. But it stopped and began to stand up in a heap while they went across. It could not be released to go downstream until they had crossed, went back into the riverbed, got 12 stones, pulled them out and stacked them on the other side. Then it could come back down and flow freely. Folks, that's an awesome story that we ought to pay attention to. He made water come out of a rock. He turned bitter water into sweet with a tree. He shoved the walls of Jericho down into the ground. They didn't just crumble. They didn't just fall. Yahweh shoved them out of the way. These are stories that we need to whet the appetite of our children about so that they know where it is written. What's the primary need that we have then to make sure that happens? What is it that you and I need to make sure that we can whet the appetites of our children with Torah? We have to know where it is written. We have to have an appetite for it. We have to read it. We have to know what it says. How can we possibly talk to them throughout the day as things rise up about, well, you know what, Torah covers that. Let's go find out what it says. We can't do that unless we ourselves know. I don't understand people who say that they have a hard time reading the Bible because they think that it's hard to understand. Every time I hear that, I think to myself, it just proves to me that you've never read it. Because if you read it, you'll find out it's not hard to understand. Read it. It's alive. It's powerful. It's filled with wisdom and instruction. It's filled with stories of how amazing Yahweh is. If we never read it, how could we possibly whet the appetite of our children and incite them to read it? The answer, of course, to that question is we can't, right? Teach them diligently is a command. Well, what does it mean? Yahweh is commanding us to help our children hunger for His instruction. Day and night, we're to find opportunities to pierce their souls with stories and insight, whetting their appetites to know more. Do not read this command and think, okay, I have to make sure that every morning we get up and I make them memorize Deuteronomy 6:4. Do not read this command and think, okay, I have to make sure that every night before they go to sleep, they quote Deuteronomy 6:4. Or I have to make sure that if we ever go on a hike, that while we're out walking, we have to stop somewhere along the way and read something out of Leviticus. That's not what this command is telling us to do, but that's how some people read it. They read in verse 7 where it says, talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And so they start making this commandment about fulfilling some duty that they have, that they must do before they can go to sleep. Oh my gosh, before we go to sleep, we've got to do this thing. Okay, kids, we've sat down in our house. Torah now commands it because we sat down, we got to read something out of Torah. That's not what this command is about. This command is about letting Torah be a vital part of our everyday life. Helping our children see the benefit, the beauty, the wisdom of Torah, which came forth from an awesome Elohim who loves us exceedingly. That's what it's about. That's verse 7. Deuteronomy 6:8. You shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them upon the posts of your house and on your gates. Is this a command? Is it? It is. It's at least two commands. Command number 1 is to be bound as a sign on our hands so that it can be as a frontlet between our eyes. And number 2 is to be inscribed on the doorpost of our house and on our gates. Well, what does that mean and how do we do it? I gave today's Torah study this title, How Broad is Your Phylactery? How broad is your phylactery? We said we're going to learn, keep, and do Torah, did we not? Well, if that's so, then we need to ask ourselves, what is a phylactery? And do any of us presently have a phylactery? And if we don't have one, do we need one? And if we need a phylactery, how wide should our phylactery be? Our Messiah gave us great insight into this instruction of Deuteronomy 6. It's found in Matthew 23. Let's go there. You there? Yes, sir. Verse 1. Then spake Yeshua to the multitude and to his disciples, saying, the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not ye after their works, for they say and do not. Now, do not misread verse 3. Verse 3 is not instruction to follow the traditions and the commandments of the Pharisees. That would be in direct opposition to everything Messiah ever taught and did. He rejected their traditions and their commandments without hesitation. That's the reason they hated him. He's not saying follow their traditions and commandment. He is saying that they sit in Moses' seat, so all that's written in Torah, we're to observe and do that. But listen to the next phrase. Don't follow their works. They say what's written, but they do not do what's written. If there's a conflict between what's written and their traditions or their commandments, they reject what's written. So he's saying don't do that. Verse 4, for they bind heavy burdens and grievous to be borne and lay them on men's shoulders, but they themselves will not move them with one of their fingers. Here's our verse to focus on. Verse 5. But all of their works they do for to be seen of men. For they make broad their phylacteries. How broad is yours? Do we even have one? They make broad their phylacteries. They enlarge the borders of their garments. They love the uppermost rooms at feasts, the chief seats in the synagogues, greetings in the markets, and to be called of men Rabbi or Rabbi. Verse 5. A phylactery is a reference to how the Pharisees and others sought to obey the commandment written in Deuteronomy 6. They understood that we're commanded to bind Yahweh's instruction on our hand, that it might be as a frontlet between our eyes. And so the way they came up to do this was a phylactery. Phylactery actually means a fortified place. A fortified place that's under guard. So what the Pharisees did is they made these little leather boxes. They made one for their head. They made one for their arm. And inside the little leather box, they would put little rolled up scrolls where excerpts from Torah were written and stored in it. It's a fortified place. It's under guard. And they would wear it on their heads and on their arms. I'm going to let you, if you would, pass those out. I've got a copy of these images.
They still do it.
Oh yeah, they still do it. If you want to Google phylactery or tehillim when you get home, and you'll see images of people still wearing these, particularly during the morning and evening prayers. And the reason they came up with these phylacteries, you'll see also the word tehillim. Tehillim means exactly the same thing as phylactery. But you'll see on the image on the left, it shows the phylacteries, their correct position to be worn. So the Pharisees and Rabbinical Judaism take Deuteronomy 6 literally and seek to obey it literally, kind of literally. Because have they bound all of Torah to their hand? Have they bound all of Torah to their head? No, because that would be a little bit ridiculous, wouldn't it? How are you going to function like that? So they said, well, it tells us to bind it. Surely we don't have to bind it all. And so they would take portions, particularly those things written in Deuteronomy 6, Exodus, and a little bit out of Deuteronomy 13, I think. They'd roll it up and stick it inside of these phylacteries. If I took Deuteronomy 6 literally, I want you to help me for a minute. How does this benefit me?
You can't get in the head and not get hurt.
I can what?
You get in the head and not get hurt.
What spiritual growth then comes from having this bound to my hand and this bound to my head? Is it possible that Torah could work like a nicotine patch or a Bengay patch, and that by osmosis or something, just by it touching my skin, the wisdom in it could go into my head?
It's already on the inside.
It's already on the inside of me. So there's no spiritual benefit to this. What benefit is there in this?
Drawing attention.
To be seen of men. And that's what Messiah said to them. Now, you're going to have to deal with the fact I messed my hair up real bad. Messiah said they took Deuteronomy 6 and just took it, twisted it up, and got it all out of whack. It's not about doing something to be seen of men. Well, let's talk about what it is then. And verse 8 says, let me say this before we read it again. When it comes to Torah, Yahweh's not looking for us to put on a show for others. Right. To try to convince them of how much spirituality we have because we know certain things. He's looking for us to love Him, and out of that love for Him to obey what He tells us to do. Deuteronomy 8 says, you shall bind them for a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. This word translated bind is translated in some form of bind 17 times. Bind or knit. You remember when the Bible tells us, Scriptures tell us that Jonathan's heart was knit with David's? Same word. It means that their hearts were tied together. So some 17 times it's translated as bind. 20 times it's translated as the word conspired or conspiracy. Conspired or conspiracy. Now think about that. What does it mean to conspire? What is a conspiracy? A conspiracy is a secret plan to do something bad or illegal. It's done behind the scenes. It means to come together with other people who have the same bad intention as you, to tie your intentions and your motives and your plans together to pull off something behind the scenes that you couldn't do by yourself, and that if it was done in the daylight it'd be stopped. So you combine your intentions, you conspire together, and you try to pull off a plan. Now don't focus on the illegal part of conspiracy. Focus on this. The point is that when they want to talk about bad people tying their thoughts together, or when they want to talk about bad people tying their motives and intentions together, this is the word they use. They use this word because this word means to take thoughts and bind them together so that they're one thought moving in unison. It says, you shall bind them, follow, for a sign. A sign means a beacon or a signal. So this verse is not telling us to literally tie Torah scrolls to our hands. It's telling us to knit or tie or bind Yahweh's thoughts to our thoughts. Find out how He thinks, bind that to your thoughts so that it becomes a signal to you every time you're about to do something. And that's what the hands represent, the ability and the power to do something. It is saying let all of your thoughts, let all of His thoughts become bound with your thoughts so that His thoughts become a beacon that affects everything you do. You know, our hands do not move independent of thought. Our hands only move in response to thought. They can do nothing except what we think on them to do. If they do good, it's because our thoughts were for them to do good. If they do evil, it's because our thoughts were for them to do evil. If they steal something or strike someone, we thought it first. You don't just walk through Walmart. You don't just walk through Walmart and your hands start stealing stuff. No, it began in your heart, began as a thought, moved your hands to do it.
Right.
If they help or aid or embrace, it's because we thought it first. And that's what Deuteronomy 6 is commanding us to do. It's commanding us to get to a place that Yahweh's thoughts are so knit with our thoughts that His thoughts become the beacon that signals our hands in what to do. Go to Isaiah 55. Isaiah 55, verse 6. But seek ye Yahweh while He may be found. Call ye upon Him while He is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. Let him return unto Yahweh, and He'll have mercy upon him, and to our Elohim, for He will abundantly pardon. Notice that our ways are connected to our thoughts. If our ways are wicked, it's because our thoughts are wicked. He says, forsake his way, the unrighteous man his thoughts. Because if he's thinking unrighteously, he's going to do wickedly. The two are tied together. This word translated wicked means to do something that's morally wrong ways, or ways that violate a code. What would the code be? Torah. So ways that violate Torah. If our ways violate Torah, how is that possible for our ways to violate Torah? Our thoughts are not bound to Torah like they should be. Listen to Yahweh explain this in verse 8. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. You see it? Your ways can't be my ways because my thoughts are not your thoughts. If my thoughts become your thoughts, then your ways will become my ways. But because my thoughts are not your thoughts, your ways are not my ways. Do you see it? What a beautiful picture here that He's painted for us. How many years did we think or did we say, well, I don't think there's anything wrong with Halloween. I don't think there's anything wrong with celebrating it. How many years did we say that? Decades?
Yes.
Right. Well, how could we think that? And we did it. How could we do that? How is it possible that we did that? Well, our ways were not His ways because His thoughts were not our thoughts. Because our thoughts were not connected or bound to Torah. When our thoughts become bound to Torah, His thoughts become our thoughts, and then our ways become His ways. And then we begin to say, well, there's no way I can participate in this, right? Because we start thinking like Him. Verse 9, for as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. You know, for the whole time I was growing up, this verse was quoted many times in the church I grew up in. But it was always quoted with the thought, you know, with the intent, His ways are so much higher than our ways, and His thoughts are so much higher than our thoughts, and we can never attain to those. But that's not what it's saying. It's saying the very opposite of that. Yahweh is calling upon us to forsake our thoughts and to embrace His thoughts so that our ways do become His ways. He wants us to think alike. He wants His ways and His thoughts to be our thoughts so that they serve as frontlets between our eyes. That phrase is an imagery. He says, bind them as a sign to your hand that they may be as a frontlet before your eyes. That's an imagery that He is creating for us. It's the image of something being bound to our forehead. He doesn't want something literally bound to our forehead. He wants us to create and think about the image. If there was something between your eyes, you couldn't help but see it. It would be there no matter what you were doing, that thing would be there. he's using that, if I dare say it, that ridiculous image of Torah scrolls being bound there in a place that they're right in front of your eyes. He's using that image to say to us, everything I'm telling you in Torah, get it on the inside of your head. Everything that I have commanded Moses to write down, get it in your thinking. Get it in your thoughts. Let my thoughts become your thoughts. Well, that's a command. And it would do us no good to bind it to our hand or to set it in our forehead if we actually didn't start reading it and thinking on it and not trying, but conforming our thoughts to His. Romans 12 says it this way, be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed. How do we get transformed? By the renewing of our mind. His thoughts becoming our thoughts. So we're commanded to let Torah be our guide for everything we think. And when it becomes the guide for everything we think, it will become the guide for everything we do. The next command in verse 9 is a command to let Torah rule over our home. It's not a command to buy or create a mezuzah. In the handout, you also see on the right-hand side a mezuzah. A mezuzah is just a small container in which, again, a piece of paper. The Shema is written on it. What is Shema? Deuteronomy 6, 3 and 4, right? Mostly. Deuteronomy 6, 3 and 4 is written. To be a true mezuzah, they say that it can't be printed, mimeograph, whatever you want to call it, copied, that you have to literally yourself hand write it out because it means to inscribe. You hand write out Deuteronomy 6, 3 and 4, and then on the other side they would write what they called the name for Yahweh, but it wouldn't be His name is Yahweh. They would write Shaddai. Anybody know what Shaddai means? Well, it's on the handout. What does Shaddai mean? El Shaddai means the Almighty. Shaddai means Almighty. And so that's the reason you will see on the front of these mezuzahs the Sheen, because the Sheen is the first Hebrew letter that starts that title, Shaddai. So that is a mezuzah. But the command here in verse 9 is not for us to make or buy mezuzah. You can buy them $9, $10, $4, $5, $6, $700, according to how much you want to spend on one. But people will buy them and then they will nail them to the doorpost of their home. When we lived in Texas, we had one nailed to the doorpost of our home. When we lived up off of Ryland Pike, we had one. I don't know that we've had one since then, but we had a mezuzah nailed to our doorpost. But that's not what this command is about. This is a command likened unto the one before it. It should be taken figuratively, because a mezuzah does not fulfill the command in Deuteronomy 6:9 literally, because all of Torah is not written on that scroll. And all of Torah is not written on the gate. Right. It's just a portion or an excerpt. So it's not to be taken literally, it's to be taken figuratively. And here's the point. Yahweh wants Torah to be the guide for how we conduct our lives. That's what He's saying to us. It should be how we conduct our lives when we walk out of our homes. It's a reminder to us. It should be a guide for how we are to conduct our lives when we walk into our home. It's to be a reminder to us. It is figuratively on our doorpost to say to us, whether we are in the privacy of our own home or whether we're out in the world, it is Torah that should dictate how we're going to think and how we're going to live. Well, these are commands. These are not suggestions. Yahweh said, teach Torah diligently to your children. Yahweh commanded, bind my thoughts which are written in Torah to your own thoughts, and make my thoughts your thoughts, so that your ways can become my ways. And it is a command that we're to let Torah determine how we live when we're at home, and how we live when we're not. It's literally the same instruction given to Joshua in chapter 1. Listen to this. The same thing Yahweh said to Joshua, He'd say to each and every one of us. Only be thou strong and very courageous, that you may observe to do according to all of Torah, which Moses, my servant, commanded you. Turn not from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may prosper where you go. This book of the law, Torah, shall not depart out of your mouth, but you shall meditate therein day and night, that you may observe to do according to all that is written therein. For then you shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. Have not I commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Be not afraid, neither be dismayed, for Yahweh your Elohim is with you wherever you go. Listen to that last phrase of verse 8 again. For then you shall make your way prosperous. Anybody remember what that word prosperous means? Say it again.
Push forward.
Then you shall get pushed forward. What's the benefit of Torah? What's the purpose of Torah?
You'll be pushed forward.
To push us forward. Listen to the next phrase. And then you shall make your way prosperous. You will. Well, how am I going to make sure I get pushed forward? By making His thoughts my thoughts, and my ways His ways. You shall make your way prosperous, and then you shall have good success. Anybody remember what that phrase good success means?
To be intelligent.
It's awesome. Thank you, Lisa. It's really awesome. What Yahweh said is, if you'll meditate on it day and night, then you shall learn to think intelligently. That's true. Get it on the inside of you. Read it, meditate on it, think on it, and it'll teach you how to think intelligently, because it's full of the wisdom of Yahweh. That's awesome. Stand up. That's at least 3 commands we went over today. Commands that remind us that the ultimate command is to love Yahweh with all of our heart, soul, strength, and mind, but that there is no way that I can even begin to do some 613 laws until I begin to study them. And we're commanded to study them, to learn them. And it's not a drudgery. Now they'll push us forward and cause us to think right. That's awesome. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. As His name is put upon you, so shall He bless you. Hallelujah.